Some dreams require different measurements, Evelyn Graves said, and the bridal shop went quiet enough to hear the receipt tear. Mara Ellis stood beneath a chandelier with her diner apron folded inside a canvas tote, her silver name tag still clipped to the pocket, her hands smelling faintly of coffee and lemon soap. On the marble counter lay 18 months of payments, one faded receipt, and a promise her mother had watched her make from a hospital bed. In the VIP corner, a man in a black suit lowered his espresso without drinking. 3 hours earlier, Mara had been wiping syrup from table 12 at Bellamy's diner, while rain scratched silver lines down the windows. Her feet hurt in the deep, private way that came after a double shift, the kind of ache that climbed from the soles into the knees and made every step feel borrowed. She had smiled through burnt toast complaints, refilled coffee for men who called her sweetheart without looking at her face, and tucked every tip into the same envelope marked dress in blue ink. Not wedding, not dream, dress, because dream felt too fragile to carry in a waitress apron. At 2:10 p.m., she changed in the employee bathroom, smoothing her plain navy dress over her hips, while the cracked mirror above the sink cut her reflection in half. From her tote, she took out the receipt and checked it again. Ivory House Bridal, deposit paid, order number 6-4-9-2B, final fitting today. Her thumb paused over the corner where her mother's handwriting still lived in tiny letters. You will look like yourself, baby. That was the last sentence her mother had written clearly before the medication made her hands forget how to obey. By 4 o'clock, Mara stood on Madison Avenue in front of glass doors polished so perfectly they reflected a woman who looked too tired to be entering them. Inside, the showroom glowed with soft white light, champagne flutes, satin sofas, and mirrors tall enough to make every insecurity feel expensive. A security camera blinked red above the front desk. Mara noticed it because waitresses notice eyes. They notice who watches, who pretends not to, who changes tone when someone important enters the room. No one greeted her. A consultant with pearl earrings looked at Mara's dress, then at the canvas tote, then back to the tablet in her hand as if the room had briefly made a mistake. Mara placed the receipt on the counter. I have a final fitting under Ellis. The woman's smile arrived too late. One moment, then Evelyn Graves appeared, slim, silver-haired, dressed in cream silk, moving with the softness of someone who had never needed to hurry. She picked up the receipt with 2 fingers. Oh, she said, just that. Her eyes moved over Mara's waist, her arms, the place where the dress pulled slightly when Mara breathed in. I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. We don't have an active bridal order for you. Mara kept both hands flat on the marble. That receipt says otherwise. Evelyn's smile did not move. Receipts fade, systems update, and couture has limits. A few brides turned. A mother near the veil wall lowered her champagne glass. In the VIP corner, Dante Vale looked up, not because of Mara's voice, but because Evelyn had folded the receipt exactly over the order number before speaking again. Perhaps, Evelyn said gently, another salon would be more comfortable with fuller silhouettes. The silence widened. Mara felt it press against her throat, old and familiar, but she did not step back. She slid the receipt out from under Evelyn's fingers, smoothed the torn corner with her thumb, and said, clear enough for the camera to catch, don't erase me just because your mirror is small. Dante's hand stopped beside his cup. He did not believe her yet. Men like him did not survive by believing tears. But his eyes had found the receipt now, and the small cold detail Evelyn had tried to hide. The order number was not missing. It had been crossed out in fresh black ink. Evelyn did not look at the ink. That was how Mara knew she had seen it. People who were innocent glanced down when accused. People who were trained kept their eyes exactly where they were. Miss Ellis, Evelyn said, still smiling, I understand this is emotional. Weddings bring out a great deal in women. A soft laugh moved through the showroom, small enough for everyone to deny later. Mara felt it touch the back of her neck. She folded the receipt once, carefully, and slipped it into the inner pocket of her tote beside her apron. Then check the original file. Evelyn's smile thinned. Of course. She turned to the pearl-eared consultant. Bring the measurement form. The girl returned with a clipboard and a measuring tape the color of old bone. Mara stepped onto the white fitting platform because Evelyn gestured to it, not because she was invited. The mirrors caught her from every direction. Hips, arms, stomach, chin. The navy dress pulling at one seam after 14 hours on her feet. Across the room, a bride in lace whispered something to her mother, and the mother pressed 2 fingers to her lips like she was holding back mercy. We'll start fresh, Evelyn said. Sometimes customers misremember what they ordered. Mara looked at her. I don't misremember money. The tape slid around her waist. Too loose. Mara felt the slack immediately. Waitresses knew measurement without rulers. How much cream was left in a pitcher by weight? How far a tray could tilt before wine spilled? How close a man was standing behind you by the change in air? The consultant called out a number 2 inches larger than the tape showed. Mara's hand closed around the tape before the pencil touched paper. The room went still. That's not my measurement. The consultant blinked. Evelyn gave a quiet, polished sigh. Body acceptance is important, but accuracy is kinder than denial. Mara took the pencil and wrote the correct number herself, clean and dark. Don't make me bigger just to make me impossible. In the VIP corner, Dante Vale's sister stopped turning in front of the mirror. Dante said nothing. He lifted his phone as if checking a message, but the camera caught the clipboard, the tape, Evelyn's hand tightening once at her side. Evelyn's voice softened further, which made it worse. This is exactly the attitude issue noted in your previous employment file. Mara's throat tightened, but she did not give Evelyn the gift of asking how she knew. I never worked sales here. No, Evelyn said. You were in alterations. Briefly. The word briefly landed like a dismissal stamped in red. Security guard shifted near the door. The bell above the entrance chimed, bright and ordinary, and for half a second the smell of wet pavement and street coffee drifted into the room. Mara almost wished she were back at Bellamy's, with a damp towel in her hand, the dishwasher groaning behind the kitchen, the ugly comfort of being tired for honest reasons. Then Evelyn placed the clipboard on the counter, and Mara saw the first real crack. Beside her name was not 1 order number, but 2. 1 crossed out in black. 1 rewritten underneath in blue. Different handwriting. Different date. Dante saw Mara see it. He finally spoke very quietly. Who changed the form? Evelyn turned toward him with perfect grace. Administrative correction. Dante's eyes stayed on the clipboard. At 11:43 p.m.? No one breathed. The consultant's face drained of color because that time had not been spoken aloud by anyone in the room. Mara looked down again, and beneath the altered form, half hidden under the metal clip, was a narrow coffee receipt from the diner across the street. 2 black coffees, paid in cash, time-stamped 11:41 p.m., the night before her fitting. The coffee receipt sat under the clip like it had been trying not to be seen. Mara stared at the timestamp until the numbers stopped being numbers and became a door cracked open in a dark room. 11:41 p.m. 2 black coffees. Paid in cash. The night before her fitting, 2 minutes before someone changed her form. Evelyn reached for the clipboard, but Mara moved first. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just 1 waitress hand over 1 piece of paper before a richer woman could make it disappear. That's mine, Mara said. No, Evelyn replied softly. That is store property. Dante watched the space between those 2 sentences. The receipt was not store property. Everyone knew it. Even the pearl-eared consultant knew it, because her eyes dropped to the marble and stayed there. Evelyn smiled at Mara as if forgiving a child. Miss Ellis, I know this is overwhelming. After long shifts, emotions can distort details. The word shifts carried just enough dirt to make the women by the veil wall glance at Mara's shoes. She felt the room measure. Her again. Waitress, tired, wide-hipped, inconvenient. A woman who smelled faintly of coffee instead of gardenias. A woman easier to dismiss than to answer. Then a sharp sound split the silence from the VIP room. Not a scream, a seam. The corset of Dante Vale's sister's gown gave way with a soft, violent rip, and the bodice loosened at the ribs like something exhaling after being held too tight. His sister froze with both hands pressed to the front of the dress. The consultant gasped. Evelyn's face did not change, but her neck did. One tendon pulled hard beneath the silk collar. "Nobody touch her," Evelyn said, too quickly. Mara looked across the room. She did not look at the diamonds, or the satin, or the frightened bride. She looked at the torn edge. 3 inches below the left back seam, ivory thread had snapped in a crooked line. The stitches were beautiful from a distance, but wrong up close. Too shallow, too tight, decorative, not structural. She knew that mistake. She had made it once when she was 23, standing in the alterations room on a winter morning, hungry enough that her hands shook. "Back seam," Mara said. Her voice was low, but the room had become a bowl for sound. "Wrong tension." Evelyn turned slowly. "Excuse me." Mara stepped off the platform. The security guard shifted like he wanted permission to stop her. Dante gave him one glance. The guard stayed where he was. Mara crossed the showroom, every mirror returning a version of her that looked too large for the room and too calm for what the room wanted from her. She stopped 3 feet from the bride. If she breathes deep, the right panel will tear next. Dante's sister went pale. Evelyn laughed once, a clean little sound. "How fortunate that our waitress is now a couture engineer." Mara did not look at her. She looked at Dante's sister. "May I?" The young woman nodded before anyone could speak for her. Mara opened her tote and took out the small emergency sewing kit she carried for apron straps, loose buttons, and the quiet disasters of working-class clothes. The ivory spool rolled into her palm. Dante's eyes dropped to it. Not because it was expensive, because it matched the broken thread exactly. Mara threaded the needle with fingers that no longer trembled. 3 stitches. That was all she needed. 1 to catch the lining. 1 to anchor the boning. 1 hidden beneath the beadwork, placed at a slight angle so the body could move without tearing the fabric again. The showroom watched her hands the way people watch a lock being picked. When she finished, the bodice sat clean against the bride's ribs. Not tight, not cruel. Held. "Breathe," Mara said. Dante's sister inhaled. Nothing tore. For the first time, Dante looked at Mara as if the room had been lying about her size, her job, her worth. But he still did not smile. "Who taught you that?" Mara tucked the needle back into its paper sleeve. "Hunger." Evelyn stepped closer, voice wrapped in velvet and blade. "Miss Ellis worked briefly in alterations years ago. Unfortunately, talent without discipline can become disruptive." Mara's old phone buzzed inside her tote before she could answer. The cracked screen lit through the canvas. A bank alert for Ivory House Bridal, refund denied, followed by a deleted voicemail notification from an unknown number saved only as IHB back office. Dante saw the screen before Mara turned it over, and in the reflection behind them, Evelyn's hand slipped her own phone into her pocket with the recorder still glowing red. Evelyn's recorder vanished into her pocket, but the red glow had already done its damage. Not proof yet. Not enough to hang a woman like Evelyn Graves, but enough to make the air change. Mara felt it first in the way the consultants stopped whispering and started watching their own hands. Dante felt it in the way Evelyn's smile recovered too quickly. "Perhaps," Evelyn said, "we should move this discussion somewhere less public. Miss Ellis has already had quite an emotional afternoon." She gestured toward the VIP fitting room, a white and gold chamber behind frosted glass where rich brides were offered champagne and poor women were offered exits. Mara did not move until she had put the ivory spool back into her tote and folded the coffee receipt into the same pocket as her torn bridal receipt. Small things disappeared in rooms like this. She had learned that before she learned how to hem silk. Inside the VIP room, the carpet was so pale it made her diner shoes look criminal. A silver tray held untouched macarons arranged by color. Dante's sister stood near the mirror, one hand resting over the repaired seam as if Mara's stitches had become something warmer than thread. A man with rimless glasses entered behind Evelyn, carrying a leather folder. "Julian Cross," he said smoothly. "Counsel for Ivory House." He did not offer Mara his hand. He offered her a pen. This is simply an incident acknowledgement. It confirms that no discrimination occurred, that the shop made a reasonable effort to assist you, and that you became disruptive after a clerical misunderstanding. Mara looked at the paper, then at the pen. The humiliation was quieter in here, but sharper. Outside, at least cruelty had witnesses. In here, it wore cuff links and smelled like cedar cologne. "You want me to sign a lie," she said. Julian's expression softened into professional pity. "I want to help you avoid embarrassment. Litigation is expensive. Public complaints can follow a person, especially someone in service work." The words entered the room cleanly and left bloodless cuts behind them. Service work. Not bride. Not designer. Not woman. Just someone who carried plates and should know the cost of making noise. Evelyn sat gracefully on the edge of a velvet chair. "Mara, dear, no one is questioning your dignity. But dignity also means understanding when a room is not built for conflict." Dante stood by the frosted glass, silent enough to become part of the wall. He had not told them to stop. He had not told Mara he believed her. He watched Julian place the pen closer. He watched Evelyn angle her body so her left side faced the security camera in the corner, blocking its view of the document. Mara noticed it too. Her eyes moved once to the camera, once to the mirror behind Dante. The mirror caught everything Evelyn thought she had hidden. Mara picked up the pen. Evelyn's shoulders relaxed. Julian almost smiled. Then Mara crossed out the sentence that said no discrimination occurred and wrote beneath it, in slow block letters, "I refuse to confirm a false statement." The pen sounded loud against the paper. Dante's eyes lowered to her hand. Not trembling. Not this time. Julian's voice lost half a degree of warmth. "That may not be wise." Mara capped the pen and placed it on the silver tray without letting it roll. "Neither is changing a woman's size on paper and calling it kindness." Evelyn stood. "This is becoming hostile." "No," Dante said. "One word." The room cooled around it. He stepped forward, not toward Mara, but toward the corner camera. "It's becoming specific." Julian closed the folder too fast. Evelyn touched his wrist, a warning disguised as composure. "Mr. Vale, with respect, this is an internal matter." Dante looked at the folder. "Then why did your lawyer bring a release before reviewing the order file?" No one answered. Outside the frosted glass, a consultant laughed too loudly at nothing. Mara's old phone buzzed again inside her tote. She did not reach for it. Evelyn did. Her eyes flicked down before she could stop herself. That was the mistake. Dante saw where she looked. Mara finally opened the tote and saw the notification. One new voicemail restored from IHB back office, timestamped 11:43 p.m. The exact minute Evelyn had sworn was only an administrative correction. Mara did not press play right away. That was the first thing Dante noticed. People desperate to be believed usually threw evidence into the air and begged the room to catch it. Mara held the old phone in both hands like it was something breakable and alive, the cracked screen glowing against her palms, her thumb hovering over the restored voicemail without touching it. "Before anyone says I recorded this," she said, her voice quiet, "I didn't. This phone barely holds a charge. It saves what people try to erase." Julian Cross gave a polished breath through his nose. Recovered voicemails are notoriously unreliable without chain of custody. Evelyn nodded as if saddened by the inconvenience of facts. And after a difficult disappointment, a bride may attach meaning to things that are simply administrative. Mara looked at the hospital bracelet wrapped around her keyring. It was old now, the plastic yellowed at the edges, her mother's name faded but still readable. She carried it because grief sometimes needed something small enough to fit in a pocket. She placed it on the silver tray beside the pen and the unsigned release. "My mother heard me make the last payment," Mara said. "July 18th. Room 412, Mount Sinai West. She made me read the order number out loud because she said a woman should know what she paid for." The VIP room did not move. Even the champagne bubbles seemed to have gone silent. Mara pressed play. At first there was only fabric noise, a breath, then Evelyn's voice, lower than it had been in the showroom, stripped of silk. Move Ellis to inactive. Transfer the deposit credit to Winthrop. Use the after-hours code. No, don't call her. Women like that always make scenes when you give them hope. A click. Then another voice, male, cautious. The system logs edits after 11. Evelyn again. Then change the measurement sheet too. Make it look impossible. The voicemail ended on a small dead beep. No one spoke. Dante did not look at Evelyn. He looked at the hospital bracelet. July 18th. Room 412. A woman dying, listening to a dress order number like it was a prayer. Then he looked at the coffee receipt timestamped 11:41 p.m. The form changed at 11:43. The voicemail restored at the exact same minute. His silence lengthened until Julian cleared his throat just to prove the room still had air. That recording, if authentic, reflects an internal customer service decision. It does not prove theft, discrimination, or intent. Mara slipped the phone back before Julian could reach for it. It proves she knew my name. Evelyn's smile returned, smaller now, sharpened at the edges. Of course I knew your name, dear. You worked here. Briefly. You were dismissed after repeated boundary issues with design materials. Mara's face changed, not with fear, but with recognition. Design materials, she repeated. Dante's eyes moved to her. She reached into her tote again and removed a folded unpaid invoice, soft from years of being opened and closed. Ivory House Bridal Alterations Department. 12 sketches digitized. No employee credit. Balance due $0. The bottom, where approval should have held Evelyn's signature, there was a different name. Dante took the paper at last. Not from Mara. From the tray. As if making sure no one could say he had accepted her desperation before accepting the evidence. He read the signature once. Then again. Something old and cold passed behind his eyes. Julian, he said. The lawyer became very still. Dante turned the invoice so only Julian could see the bottom line. Why is my consigliera's name on her file? Julian did not answer quickly enough. That was the answer. In rooms like this, powerful men lied fast. Innocent men asked what the paper meant. Julian Cross only stared at the invoice. His mouth closed around words he had suddenly decided were dangerous. Dante folded the page once and slipped it into the inside pocket of his coat. Evelyn's smile flickered. Mr. Vale, I'm sure there's a simple explanation. Your organization has many holdings, many consultants. A signature on an old alteration invoice hardly means, stop. Dante did not raise his voice. He made less sound than the rain tapping against the showroom glass, and still the room obeyed. He turned to Mara. What do you want? Julian inhaled as if relieved by the question, already preparing a number, a settlement, a quiet payment large enough to make a waitress disappear politely. Mara looked at the velvet chair, the silver tray, the unsigned lie, the hospital bracelet with her mother's name facing up under the chandelier light. Not money, she said. The words came out rougher than she wanted. Money is what they took because they knew I needed it. I want the file corrected. I want my mother's last receipt to stop being treated like trash. And I want whoever used my name to sell dresses to say my name out loud. For the first time, Dante's expression changed. Not softened, sharpened. He looked at her as if she had just refused the one kind of apology wealthy people understood. Then he looked back at Julian. Get me the order history. Now? Julian asked. Dante's eyes stayed still. Now. Evelyn reached for her phone. Dante's bodyguard, a quiet man who had not spoken once, stepped closer without touching her. She lowered her hand. 5 minutes later, the VIP room had become colder than any courtroom. Dante's private counsel, a woman named Celia Ward, appeared by video call on Julian's tablet, her voice clean and flat as she requested login records, payment transfers, employee contracts, camera retention logs, and any document carrying the Vale family acquisition mark. Julian complied because Dante watched him comply. Mara stood near the mirror, one hand around the strap of her tote, listening to the soft tap of rain, the buzz of the old phone dying in her pocket, the the tiny clink of Dante's sister setting her champagne flute down without drinking. Ordinary sounds, almost gentle. Then Celia said, "There are 12 deposits moved from plus-size orders into VIP accounts over 4 years. No one breathed. All after hours. All edited under secondary access." Dante asked, "Whose card?" Celia paused. E. Graves opened the files. "But the override belongs to Matteo Rusk." The name entered the room like smoke under a locked door. Julian closed his eyes for half a second. Evelyn's lips parted. Mara did not know the name, but Dante did. Everyone close to him knew he did. Matteo Rusk had stood beside Dante at funerals, sat behind him at hearings, carried messages no one else was trusted to carry. His consigliere, his oldest knife. Celia continued, "There's more." The design contracts for uncredited alteration staff were bundled into a shell company before the boutique's last valuation. Whoever controlled those designs increased the store's sale price by 32%. Mara's hand went to the old phone in her tote. "My sketches," she whispered, but not like a question. Like something inside her had finally stopped pretending it was only grief. Evelyn found her voice. "Many young employees sketch. Inspiration is collaborative in fashion." Mara turned to her. "My mother's hospital bracelet was on my wrist in the photo you cropped." Silence. Dante looked at her then. Really looked. Not at the waitress dress. Not at the tired shoes. Not at the body the room had tried to turn into an argument. He looked at the woman who had kept receipts, voicemails, invoices, and pain because no one, with power, had ever kept truth for her. Celia's voice came once more through the tablet. "Dante, the cropped photo is in the 2019 investor deck. Matteo presented it to you." Dante's face went still in a way that made even Julian step back. He remembered the slide now. A faceless seamstress beside a half-built gown, praised as evidence of Ivory House heritage. He had signed the acquisition memo without asking whose hands were in the picture. His eyes dropped to Mara's work-worn fingers. The mistake was not that he had trusted a liar. The mistake was that he had never wondered who had been erased. Dante did not apologize. Not yet. Apologies were easy. Correction required patience. He only closed the tablet, placed the old invoice beside Mara's hospital bracelet, and said, "We test it." Evelyn's hand stopped halfway to the door. "Test what?" Dante looked at her calmly. "The truth." 20 minutes later, the showroom was bright again. Too bright. Every chandelier burning over silk and glass as if nothing ugly had ever happened there. Consultants returned to their stations with tight smiles. Champagne was poured but left untouched. In the center of the room, on the marble counter, Dante placed 3 things in a neat line. Mara's faded receipt, the altered measurement form, and a blank transfer request pulled from Ivory House's own system. Beside them sat a sealed cream envelope with Matteo Rusk's name written across it. No one opened it. That made it worse. A small red light blinked above the front desk camera. Mara noticed Evelyn notice it, then pretend not to. Dante's sister stood near the veil wall, still wearing the gown Mara had saved. Celia Ward remained on the phone, silent now, listening. Julian Cross had lost the warmth in his face and replaced it with law. "Mr. Vale," he said, "this is highly irregular." Dante did not look at him. "Good." He turned to Evelyn. "Walk me through the correction." Evelyn smiled because she understood performance. She had survived for years by sounding reasonable in rooms where women like Mara sounded emotional just by breathing. A bride's file may be adjusted when the original order cannot be fulfilled. We move the deposit as a courtesy to a comparable gown or, if inventory prevents that, to inactive status. At 11:43 p.m., Dante asked. Her eyelid twitched. After-hours work is common in luxury retail. Mara looked down at the transfer request. Something about the blank line bothered her. Not the legal language. Not the brand stamp. The table number printed in the corner. B17. She had seen that number before, not in a bridal shop, but on a diner order slip, the night Evelyn's coffee receipt was printed. B17 was the booth by the back window at Bellamy's. the one with a dead neon strip above it that made everybody's skin look blue. She didn't meet in an office, Mara said quietly. Every head turned to her. Evelyn laughed, but it came a beat late.
I'm sorry.
Mara touched the coffee receipt in her tote without taking it out. You met someone at my diner. Booth 17. 2 black coffees. You sat with a man who held his pen in his left hand but signed with his right. Julian's face changed before Evelyn's did. That was the second crack. Dante saw it. Why does that matter? He asked, not because he did not know, but because he wanted the room to hear her answer. Mara looked at the invoice. Because the signature on my file leans right. A real left-handed signature drags the ink at the end. This one doesn't. Silence closed around Evelyn's throat. Dante slid the blank transfer request toward her and placed a pen on top. Sign it. Evelyn stared at him. What? Sign the correction as you would have that night. That's absurd. Then decline. The pen lay there, black and still. Julian's phone began to vibrate inside his jacket. Once, twice, 3 times. He did not touch it. Evelyn reached for the pen with the careful anger of a woman picking up a knife in a room full of witnesses. Her signature curved across the page, elegant, practiced, flawless. Mara watched the last stroke. That's not the same hand, she said. Dante took a photo. Then, without looking away from Evelyn, he opened the cream envelope. Inside was the key card log from 11:43 p.m. The override had not been used by Evelyn. It had been used by Matteo Rusk. Evelyn's face emptied. For the first time since Mara walked in, she looked not offended, not superior, not graceful. She looked afraid. Dante placed the key card log beside Mara's receipt, close enough that the 2 pieces of paper nearly touched. Again, he said softly. Who changed her name? Evelyn looked at Mara then, and the hatred in her eyes finally lost its manners. But behind Mara stood Dante's sister, Celia's open line, the blinking camera, and a man quiet enough to make the whole room dangerous. That was when Evelyn understood the chubby waitress was no longer standing alone. Evelyn understood too late that the room had changed owners before the papers were signed. Not legally. Not yet. Something colder than law had entered first. The belief of the room had moved. Mara felt it shift behind her, not as warmth, but as space. For the first time, the mirrors did not seem to be pushing her out. Dante placed the key card log on the marble counter and looked toward the front doors. Bring him in. No one asked who. 2 minutes later, Matteo Rusk walked into Ivory House Bridal wearing a gray suit, a burgundy tie, and the calm expression of a man who had never once been called to a room without already knowing how to survive it. He smiled at Dante, then at Evelyn, then, almost as an afterthought, at Mara. I was told there was confusion over a customer file. His voice was gentle, educated, heavy with the patience of men used to being trusted. Dante said nothing. He only turned the showroom lights lower and nodded once to Celia Ward's face on the tablet. The front wall, where promotional films usually showed thin brides moving through sunlit gardens, flickered blue, then loaded a security file. The camera angle was poor, grainy, black and white. The diner across the street at 11:41 p.m. Booth 17 beneath the dead neon strip. Mara gripped the strap of her tote. There was Evelyn, coat collar raised, face turned away. Across from her sat Matteo Rusk, left hand around a paper coffee cup, right hand signing a transfer sheet. 2 black coffees between them. The timestamp blinked in the corner like a pulse. Julian Cross whispered, "That footage was not from our system." Mara looked at him.
No.
It was from mine. Her voice did not shake. Bellamy's keeps 30 days unless someone asks Mr. Lopez nicely before he overwrites the tapes. The room turned toward her. She pulled the small coffee receipt from her tote, the paper soft from her fingers, and placed it under the screen's glow. I remembered the booth because the neon makes everybody look sick. Nobody laughed. On screen, Matteo slid a file across the table. Evelyn opened it. The camera had no audio, but Celia added the restored voicemail beneath it. Evelyn's voice filled the showroom. stripped bare and cruel. Move Ellis to inactive. Transfer the deposit credit to Winthrop. Use the after-hours code. Then Mateo's voice, quieter, unmistakable. Make sure the sketches stay under the acquisition packet. Dante doesn't read seamstress names. Dante went still. Not angry. Worse, empty. The kind of stillness that came after a bullet found the place it was meant to go. Mara saw his jaw tighten once, then stop. He had not flinched when Evelyn insulted her. He had not moved when the lawyer threatened her. But at that sentence, something in him froze so completely the room seemed to lose temperature. Mateo turned pale. That's edited. Mara reached into her tote again and took out the old phone. Then say the next part before it plays. Mateo's mouth opened. Nothing came out. She pressed play. His voice returned, tinny and damning from the cracked speaker. She's a waitress now. Women like that don't come back with lawyers. The silence afterward was so thick that even the champagne bubbles sounded obscene. Dante looked at Mara's hands, at the receipt she had protected, at the hospital bracelet on the tray, at the old phone with its dying battery, and then at Mateo, the man he had trusted to guard the doors while women like Mara were erased behind them. I signed your acquisition memo, Dante said, each word quiet enough to hurt. Mateo swallowed. You signed what I advised. No, Dante's eyes did not blink. I signed what you hid. Evelyn tried one last time. Mr. Vale, she is manipulating grief. Her mother, the dress, the body issues. Mara stepped forward before Dante could speak. Small movement. Huge room. My mother is dead, she said. My body is not evidence against me. That broke something. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But every face in the showroom changed because the lie could no longer dress itself as policy. Dante picked up the pattern ledger from the counter, opened to the page where Mara's name had been painted over in white ink, and held it beneath the chandelier. Under the light, her original signature rose faintly through the stain. Mara Ellis, designer. Dante stared at it, and for one terrible second, he could not speak. Then he closed the ledger with a soft, final sound, laid it in front of Mateo, removed his cufflinks one by one, and said, Call my attorney. Dante did not have Mateo dragged out. That would have been easy, and easy justice was usually just another performance. He let the attorney arrive. He let the board be called. He let Celia Ward place every document in order on the marble counter where Mara's receipt had been torn. The diner footage, the restored voicemail, the keycard log, the altered measurement form, the transfer records, the investor deck with her body cropped out and her work left in. By sunset, Evelyn Graves no longer had an office. Mateo Rusk no longer had access to a single Vale account. Julian Cross sat with both hands folded while Celia informed him that advising silence around fraud was different from practicing law. No one raised their voice. That made it worse. The showroom that had laughed at Mara that afternoon became a courtroom without a judge. Every mirror forced to hold what it had helped hide. Dante bought Ivory House before midnight, but not like a man buying an apology. He bought the debt, the contracts, the archives, the trademarks, the locked design room, the employee files, and the ugly little system that had taught women to be grateful for humiliation if it came wrapped in satin. 3 weeks later, the front windows were covered in brown paper. Inside, every plus-size deposit that had been stolen was refunded with interest. Every bride who had been told her body was the problem received a letter signed by Dante Vale and Mara Ellis together. Evelyn faced civil charges. Mateo faced worse. A board investigation, frozen accounts, and the quiet, total removal from every room where he had once whispered into Power's ear. But the part that made Mara sit down was not the money. It was the file. Celia placed it in front of her one rainy morning at Bellamy's diner, while the neon sign buzzed blue over booth 17 and the dishwasher groaned behind the kitchen. Inside was her name, restored on every sketch. Mara Ellis, designer, not assistant, not temporary, not difficult, designer. There was also a payment plan for her mother's remaining hospital bills, handled through a legal restitution fund, not charity. Dante made that clear. They used your need against you, he said. They don't get to call repayment kindness. Mara looked at him for a long time. He was in a black coat instead of a suit, sitting at the counter like he had not once made senators lower their eyes. "You always talk like you're signing something," she said. His mouth almost moved. "I usually am." 2 months later, Ivory House reopened without champagne towers or velvet ropes. The first collection was not named after a city or a flower or some dead European queen. It was called Every Bride. The mannequins in the window stood in different sizes, different heights, different bodies, each dress fitted instead of forced. In the back design room, framed beneath museum glass, was Mara's torn receipt beside her mother's hospital bracelet and the ivory spool of thread she used to carry in her waitress apron for broken straps and emergency hems. The things that once proved she had been poor, tired, and easy to dismiss now proved she had been present the whole time. On opening day, Dante did not introduce her with a speech about beauty. He simply stepped aside while the board, the staff, the press, and the brides watched Mara walk to the center of the showroom in the wedding dress she had redesigned for herself. The waist did not punish her. The sleeves did not hide her. The seams held because they had been built around the truth of her body, not against it. Mara stood before the same mirrors that had once multiplied her shame and saw, finally, only one woman looking back. At closing, she returned to Bellamy's for coffee. Dante followed without guards inside. Mara hung her clean apron on the hook by the kitchen, placed the old phone on the counter, and pushed a hot mug toward him. "My mother was right," she said softly. Dante looked at the restored name tag beside her cup. "About what?" Mara smiled, tired and whole. A woman should know what she paid for. And for once, power sat quietly across from the woman it had failed to see, listening while the truth finished speaking.